A couple of words prior to our launch this evening. Welcome everyone. It's nice to see so many here for our representatives' question and answer opportunity. We Hiawatha Toastmasters are happy to host and hopefully lead along the journey and close us out on time this evening. We appear to have a great number of questions. I believe, Lorna, are you counting through the questions? There's quite a number, and that's good. Just a brief word, if you have cell phones or any other noise-making device, hit the quiet mode. If you have to take a call, please step out. Beyond that, the restrooms are located here. They really appreciate any beverage purchase, or feel free to order in another pizza at any point. If your table gets a little antsy for some nourishment, that is fine. We Toastmasters are a very apolitical group. We've had over the years members from all persuasions politically. We like to say we don't really, in our club functions, focus on what your opinion is, but it's rather how well you can state your purpose, your opinions, and so forth. Respectful and civilly. I recall many years ago, we had amongst our membership a retired, well, not retired, but a Catholic nun and a person that was pro-abortion, and they did a very civil and respectful debate on such a hot topic as that. And I learned a lot about how, even no matter how hot the issue could be, how well it's handled by someone who really understands how to get their point across in a civil, respectful manner. We like to incorporate a little spot of humor to warm things up, and I heard some big news out of Egypt this morning. I'm not sure if Lorna or anyone else has, but it was kind of shocking. Everyone here familiar with King Tut, old King Tut? Yep. Well, on one of the walls, on the stone walls, they found some writing they'd never looked at before. And surprisingly, he spent a lot of time in prison back there in Egypt. Yes, he was involved in a giant pyramid scheme. And here in southeast Minnesota, corn is king. There's corn everywhere. It looks like we're in for a bumper crop. Sweet corn, my gosh, it's just fabulous. And I'm sure our representatives, being from the area and so familiar with corn and all things such, Steve, I'm sure you're aware, why would you never buy sweet corn from a pirate? Well, they're always trying to charge a buccaneer, right? That's not what you guys came here tonight for. What you came here tonight is some serious and important topics. And let us now stand, rise, and if we can, recite our pledge to warm our hearts and our voices.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Lorna, are you ready? And would our representatives now feel free to take a seat here at the front if you can. We have a microphone for each. We have opportunity now for some opening statements. Prior to that, I do want to explain there are a good number of questions. We hope to, feel free to move about at your chairs as you see fit. We have a good number of questions, and we hope to wrap things up. I would say, are we on the schedule at 8 p.m. or thereabouts, Ernie, to wrap up tonight?
They'd like us out of here by 8:30.
Okay, they'd like us out by 8:30.
Last call, 8:30.
Okay, and questions wrapping up some point before that. With that in mind, just so our representatives know, way in the back we have some cards. A green card will be displayed should your response go longer than 3 minutes. At 4 minutes, a yellow card will be held up. And at 5 minutes, a red card. Now, yes, and at 6 minutes, the gentle Jersey will tingle the bell. And maybe at 7, they get kind of enraged and start really bouncing around back there. So last time I was here, we had 10 city council representative candidates. But representatives, do you have any concerns or questions before we begin? Thank you. At this point, Lorna, would you ask for the opening statements, and I'll sit down. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Can you hear me okay out there?
No.
Al, can you hear me okay? No. Now, can you hear me okay?
Yeah. That's better.
Yeah. All right, I just have to put it a little closer. Yep. My name is Lorna Ross, and I am a former Hiawatha Valley Toastmaster. I've helped out with this group here before, so I am glad to be back and see some familiar faces. A while ago when I met both representatives, I was a Wisconsinite, a Wisconsin resident, and now as I meet and more importantly listen to our representatives, I am currently a Minnesotan. I now live in Red Wing with my husband, and we like it here very much, so we would like to stay for a while. I want to thank everybody for attending. Especially want to thank the representatives for taking time out of their busy evenings tonight for us, and definitely want to thank the American Legion for providing the forum here. And we better get started because I have a whole bunch of questions here that we want to get to. So Representative Barb Haley, would you please have an opening statement for the group, please? And then we will ask Representative Steve Drazkowski the same. Thank you. I think you have to push the button.
Do I need this, or is my voice loud enough?
Use it. Use it.
Thank you, Barb.
All right, thanks. Barb Haley, I'm the state representative. I'm in my second term. I was elected first in 2016. I was born and raised in Red Wing. Moved away to college and work and career like most people do, and then you do what you never said you were going to do in high school. You move back to your hometown. Moved back here with our kids when they were little, and just love it. My background is in business. Graduated from St. Thomas in International Studies and Econ and German. I don't use my German much anymore, so don't quiz me on that. But spent most of my career working for a startup cellular telecommunications company called McCaw Communications, and then worked for AT&T. So I had kind of the best of both worlds, an entrepreneurial experience, and then working, of course, for one of the largest companies in the world. That career spanned about 16 years, and then when we moved back here, my kids were young, I wanted to re-engage in the community. So I did a lot of nonprofit work and volunteering, and I did some nonprofit consulting, served on the hospital board and chaired the board for a number of years, and I worked for an education foundation. Then I got involved in workforce. That was a little bit accidental. I was working with the high school robotics team, and I was taking kids out to manufacturing sites so they could see how are things made and where does automation fit in and what's the future with robotics. And I was doing that. The CEOs or the plant managers would say, who are these kids? We need workers. This is our future workforce. How do we connect with these kids? And that led me to some work in the community, connecting the manufacturers with our high schools and our technical college here. All those things sort of come together, as life does when your experiences converge, when I was asked to run for this seat. I love serving my community. I love this part of the state. I care deeply about this region, our economic vitality, safety, security, the vitality of our farm community. And I felt like I could bring all that past experience to play in serving in St. Paul. So I focus on healthcare. I do a lot of work, and I serve on the HHS committee. I have the past 2 terms, HHS Finance. It's often the committee that nobody wants to serve on because it's so difficult, and the issues are quite intense. I've served on K-12 policy. I've served on higher ed. This past session, I served on the Jobs and Economic Development Committee, and also on a Water Commission. So again, I've focused my legislative priorities really on the things that I see are priorities for our district. Making sure our students have opportunities, making sure our schools are strong, making sure that our families have opportunities, whether it's business or farming, and keeping our downtown vibrant. And then of course, working on all of the issues related to healthcare that are not only a challenge for our region, but for our state and our country. I'll stop now. I know Representative Drazkowski will give a statement, but just want to say thanks for coming. It's always good when we can have a conversation, because issues are complex. They're very rarely black and white. And so it's nice to be able to just talk things through. So I appreciate the time that you're taking to be here tonight, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Barb Haley. Now Representative Steve Drazkowski, please.
Good evening, everybody. Steve Drazkowski. I represent House District 21B, which would be south of Red Wing here. It would be the southern half of Goodhue County, the southern half of Wabasha, northern half of Winona County, and a smidgen of Dodge County. There's one township and its contiguous city, Concord Township, in the city of West Concord in Dodge County. So very much a rural district. About half the population is farm and rural, and the other half is small towns. There's not a town in House District 21B that's over 5,000 people. As a matter of fact, Goodhue is the largest city, and it's probably 41 or 4,200 people. So my background is agriculture. I grew up on a farm in west central Wisconsin, right across a creek from Winona. And Dad was a farm boy. Mom grew up in town. Her family owned a small business, a shoe store. So I grew up laboring daily on the farm with my 4 brothers, and learned a lot about the benefits of hard work and dedication to your family and your business. So physical therapy happened daily on the farm. So whether it was climbing the silos or I was pounding in fence posts down in the valley, battling off the deer flies that were trying to bite you right here. And so what you do, of course, is you wise up and you wear a cap. But I have, I have one daughter. She is 28 now. She lives in Manassas, Virginia, is getting married end of next month. So my wife, Laura, and I will be out there for that event. And speaking of weddings, Senator Goggin sends his regards. His son is getting married in Colorado as we speak. He thought him and I are actually very good friends, and we were talking about this event, and he said, it's on the 28th. I said, I got it on the 26th. And so we had different dates, and anyway, so he was unable to make it, but looks forward to being at another event like this in the future. So sends his regards, and he'll come back with another member of his family, so he's looking forward to that. I have served in the legislature for 12 years now. I was elected in a special election in 2007 in August, and my background is agriculture. I grew up on a farm. I went to school at the University of Wisconsin River Falls, a master's degree then from the University of Minnesota. I'm trying to remember what green means, Al, but I'm almost done, he says. Okay, and my committees I currently serve on are the Property Tax Committee, the Ways and Means Committee, and the Rules Committee. So I look forward to the questions, Lorna, and everybody, thanks for having me.
Thank you, representatives. The green means you have 1 more minute left. That's what that means. So if you do see that, just do what you did. Tidy it up fast, please, quickly. No, you guys are doing fine, and just going to thank you in advance for, again, the time and effort that you're putting into answering these questions. All right, so I just want to clear up something. One question for both of you. You are both running for re-election in 2020, correct? Great, okay. And I think so, okay. Great, then let's continue. Also, for both of you, which will you be running for Congress? That would be a question for both of you. Are you both going to run for Congress, or what's your response to that, please? Inquiring minds want to know, at least one person wants to know out there.
Well, at this point, my plans are to continue serving 21A through the next year, the next half of the biennium, and then running again in 2020 for my same seat.
I have not made any decisions in concrete right now, Lorna, but I've been encouraged to run for Congress by a number of people, so I've considered it, been considering it. Not running for Congress today. Could change in the future, but I'm not on any fast track, I can tell you that much. So anyway, still thinking about it, and the fire in the belly has to be much stronger than it is now in order to be a yes, if that's helpful. Anyway.
Awesome, thank you. It is helpful because it sounds to me like you want to try to fix and repair some things locally before going on to bigger, more wider things. All right, question for Representative Haley. What challenges facing our youth and their families need the highest priority during this next session? And if you want me to read the question again, just let me know.
Good question. The first thing that comes to mind is mental health. We've done a lot. This past session, we put a lot of money back into mental health. A couple things directly for kids and families. Something called School Link mental health grants, which enables the providers to do their work in schools so we can serve more kids, and you don't have the problem of a parent having to pick up a child, get them to an appointment at a clinic or a provider site, get them back to school, etc. And we feel that touch point is really important. So we put money into School Link mental health grants. We also put money into just more resources. We all know whether it's resources for farmers or kids, everywhere in our state, mental health is an issue. So I think that's a priority. Also, what I said before in my opening statement, I care a lot about making sure kids are ready, whether that means ready for kindergarten or ready for high school or ready when they graduate from high school. Are we doing the right things all along that continuum to make sure that kids are learning what they need to learn and that they're also socially, emotionally ready? Serving on higher ed and the jobs committee, I pay attention to that transition point from high school to work, and I've done a number of initiatives and proposals there. One of them is called the Youth Skills Training Grant. We all know that our manufacturers are in dire need of employees, and we have kids that we aren't exposed to what manufacturing is nowadays. It's not the dark, dingy, boring job that they maybe think it is. So I carried some legislation to allow high school kids to get out on a site, to be at Red Wing Shoe, to be at Hearth and Home, to be at Gemini and Cannon Falls. And they also got high school credit while they were doing that. So they'd have a 4-hour shift at a manufacturing site. They would be mentored and tutored there. And then they would also meet as a cohort back in the high school, and they got credit for OSHA 10 skills. It was a super successful program. Our district is continuing it and expanding it. And it's really fun to see those kids, and particularly the ones that got to make their own pair of Red Wing boots start to finish. They were really enthused that they got that opportunity. So again, being prepared, whether it's college, whether it's 2-year, whether it's going to the military or getting a trade. I think we have to expose kids to all of those opportunities and making sure that we're doing everything as a state to make sure that they can be successful. We have too many kids, I think, that are going on to college and maybe aren't sure what they're gonna do, and they end up with a lot of debt, but they don't have a lot of skill and they've lost time. So I like to focus on more counseling and opportunities in high school so that they can make that transition a little bit more seamless. Was there a second part of the question? Was mainly kids and families? I guess the other thing
Just your priority.
Okay, when I think about, again, that sort of transition to adulthood and families, a recent thing I'm working on is housing. And I don't know, there might be other questions in there about housing, but we have a real challenge right now with affordable housing when you look at young families. We have 10,000 people that commute into the Red Wing area every day to work, but we'd like them to live here, right? Live here, put their kids in our schools, shop in our downtown, and help our entire economy. But we have a shortage of affordable housing. So that's a piece that I'm hoping to work on this next part of the biennium as well. I think I'm getting that card, so I'll wrap it up.
Okay, thank you, Representative. All right. Representative Steve, are the Republicans going to defend their views or let the Democrats tell lies about our stance? An example would be, Democrats said Republicans did not support pre-existing conditions. No response to that led to the misunderstanding of constituents who voted for Democrats. Now that's more of a statement than a question. The question, I think, revolves around, are the Republicans going to defend their views or, not let the Democrats run all over us?
Okay, thank you for that question. Well, that's a question about campaigns and elections, and so that's really kind of paramount to, what are we going to be doing with the next election in 2020? What did we learn, those of us that are Republicans, those that are Democrats? The Democrats won last time. They came with a message that was assertive, maybe even aggressive at times, and this is what we find in the political arena, is that you form out a message that either does one of two things. It either promotes what you're doing, your ideas, and the good direction that you're going, or it antagonizes your opponent. And the Democrats did that last time, I think, successfully, with lots of money in Minnesota. They outspent us, I can't remember the amount, of 15, 16, or 17 times the amount of money in the state of Minnesota. I mean, you start with Elida Messenger, the multi-billionaire that funds campaigns up and down the ballot for Democrats, and that money and the fuel behind it. To their credit, what they did last time, we had a good message to share around taxes and the economy, and really could have focused on the successes that the president and the Congress had at cutting taxes from the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And we also cut taxes in state government last year. And we could have married those together and have had a very strong economic message that would have came forward if we as Republicans had been successfully communicating on all cylinders in unison with our monies that we have. Instead, we had very disjointed messages, and the monies that we did have were spent on small, tiny messages that were all different, and the people didn't hear and didn't get that resonating. That the Democrats did with their message was outlined, that particular message is outlined in that particular example that the writer wrote there. But they focused on that one issue, and they had similar talking points. The money was spent in all different areas by different groups in their context, redistributing, reverberating that message so that the people heard it. And so I think the answer to it really is around successful messaging and working together in a uniform, unison type of way. And the election before, we probably did a better job than they did. So we will see what happens in 2020. I understand the president's going to come here and the RNC with a lot of resources. We're going to be matching the Democrats, or even maybe beating them in Minnesota with resources this time. And it's incumbent upon us to get all cylinders of the car working together around that message.
Thank you. You can clap. That gives me a chance to Yeah, I was going to say, save your clapping till the end, and then I thought, no, this is to my advantage. All right, let's go ahead and stay on this particular subject, okay? So this would be a question these next two questions are for both of you. And let me go ahead with this one. Why are the Goodhue property taxes so high? A year ago, they were up 64%, but then reduced to 32%. But now this year they're up 32%. I'm not sure about that as I read it, I'm sorry. But this year they're up 32% is what I'm getting out of that. This particular person feels they are old and they're sick and they're broke and they just need some assistance. So help us, old retirees, please. How would you respond to the Goodhue property taxes being so high? Either one of you, go ahead.
Property tax guy, so. I'll take just make a few comments. Taxes in general, not only in our county, but across our state are high. We are one of the highest tax states, no matter what category, if you're talking about property taxes, income tax, estate tax. Minnesota ranks in the top, 1 to 4 in all those categories. I think our challenge as a state is to make sure we use our resources wisely and we make sure that government works efficiently. And sometimes that's an oxymoron, right? Government working efficiently. Again, as I said, I serve on Health and Human Services. We've been addressing fraud and waste, and it seems like every time you read the paper, you see another instance of that. So that's the frustration. I really appreciate that question and share that frustration with taxpayers, and particularly if you are older and retired and you're on a fixed income. You can't just continually every year have those go up. School levies increase property taxes, so Red Wing did have a levy that passed, so related to the specific question about Goodhue County, that probably had a lot to do with it. I think it's incumbent upon us is to continue to challenge where is government spending their money. And we just can't always be on this trajectory of every year the budget just keeps going up. That doesn't happen in your families, it didn't happen in the business when I ran a division and had to do a budget. Sometimes you cut some areas and you move your priorities around. Every year you just didn't see an increase. I'll let Steve take more on that, but just briefly, we did cut Social Security income tax. We took a slice out of that in 2016. We did it again last year, but that's going to take quite a few years in order for us to be a zero tax on Social Security income. But we fought back against the governor's $12 billion tax increases. That was actually one of, I think, the biggest achievements of this session, is how much we fought back against the tax increases, because there is no loss of appetite for spending in St. Paul.
So I was fortunate to be able to chair the property tax committee in the House for 4 different years. It's a post, isn't it? Can I stand here? Is that better?
Yeah.
Yes.
I experienced the same thing I did. And so I learned a lot about property taxes, and I'm still learning a lot, but we have one of the most complex, we have the most complex property tax system in all 50 states. We have 55 different property tax classifications. And for the person who asked this question, you know why? Because groups of people have petitioned legislatures in the past at the Capitol to try to escape property taxes. They want the spending to happen at the local governments, but they want to carve out for them. And they obtained them through the legislature in the past. So that's why we got 55 different classifications that allowed some people to get, or some groups of property to get, reduced rates in those different areas. So what happens, I think most people in here know, the one thing about property taxes, when one group of properties get reduced property taxes and their rate goes down, what happens to everybody else?
Goes up.
Everybody else goes up. And why is that? The reason is you have a fixed amount of money that local government is asking to spend. And that money then is dropped down over the structure of property tax classifications and the valuations of each of those homes and other properties within that locale. And so it starts with the amount of spending. That is what drives it. Whether it's the city or the county or the school or the township, that dictates the overall property tax level. And then it's spread out and paid for depending on that classification and the valuations of the properties. So, you know, you get this sometimes from local government officials, and they'll point at state government, and they are right on one thing, and I see a commissioner here today. They are right on one thing. One thing we do in state government that affects property taxes is we put forward mandates, and we place them on schools, on counties, on cities, and townships, and it costs them money. And so how do they do those? The way they do them is they raise property taxes. So I would have to say in the last 2 years we've had less of those mandates, but a number of years that I've been in the legislature we've had way too many of them. But that's not the only thing. There's a lot of spending decisions that go on in our local governments. The city of Red Wing at one time was the second highest per capita spender in the state of Minnesota. Now today they might be number 3 or 4, I don't know where they're at, Barb. But this city spends a lot of money. I don't live here, but a city of 16,000 people and you got a full-time union fire department? I mean, okay, well, you know, for the person who asked that question, if you want that, you have to pay for it. Because there's no free lunch here. And a lot of times we'll hear from people, well, I like my stuff, I like the services, but how do you know, I'm in a certain area, how do you exempt me? In other words, I want the services, but I want somebody else to pay for them. And there's not a free lunch. The numbers come through in the end, unless you're able to go to the legislature and make one more carve out for your particular group, and now then we go from 55 to 56 classifications, and then 57 and 58, and it's a mess already for the people to try to understand, and even the assessors and people who are working in counties and city and school governments and try to figure it out. We have to make it easier, less complex, get back down to, some states have 1, 2, or 3 classifications, we have 55. But again, we've tried to hide the fact or mask the fact that guess what? If you want all this spending and all these services, you got to pay for it. So it's going to be up to the people to start saying, you know what? We got enough services. We don't really need a pool in our school. Do we need well, we need to keep up with Apple Valley. Well, no, you don't. And maybe there's a different niche you carve out there. And it's up to holding, so if you want the biggest effect on property tax, start attending your city council meetings, your county board meetings, your school district board meetings, and your township meetings. Not as much the townships, they do a pretty good job. But the other 3, that's where it's at. Thank you.
Alrighty. Let's hear from Representative Haley. Why did you oppose the wage theft bill this past session?
I opposed the wage theft bill because I thought it was taking a sledgehammer to a very small problem. Not that I certainly want all workers to be paid for what they thought they were contracted for and for the work that they do. 99.9% of our employers in the state of Minnesota do just that. They run a fair business, they pay their workers what they say they're going to pay. This proposal, while we debated it quite often, again, I serve on the Jobs Committee, so I heard it frequently, and I just felt it was too onerous. And I talked to many business owners across our district about it, and they were just throwing up their hands, saying, we haven't done anything wrong, but you're going to add all this additional regulation and paperwork for us. What do you think that's going to do to our cost of doing business? What I supported and what we heard from the department is that they didn't have enough folks to investigate wage theft. So what I would have preferred is if you don't have enough investigators, and you know there's certain industries and there's even certain cities in our state where we know this happens more. It happens more in the hospitality industry. It happens more in the small construction industry, not the bigger outfits. So we had some data on where it's happening. So then if you need more investigators and you know where the bad apples are, let's be strategic and focused and targeted with state resources. Let's go after that. versus a mandate that now applies to every single employer in the state, with the employers in my district telling me you've just added to my cost and I'm doing everything right.
Yes, thank you.
Lorna, would you like an answer from me too?
Yes, please.
Okay, I had never heard of the term wage theft until this session started. I've been in the legislature 12 years. I was like, well, what changed? Well, the Democrats had control of the House. They were coming in on a very strong socialist movement. The core metro of Minneapolis and St. Paul controlled their caucus last session, the session before, but now this session they have many of those same members, and they supersized it. And those people came in with an agenda and a vengeance to enact their agenda, which this whole item came, this is a union demand. And I agree with exactly what Representative Haley said. If there are places and times when people are being mistreated or maltreated, we need to have, we need to have recourse for them. But this was actually a grab for them, and then it was another step. Remember, socialism is when the state controls the land, the labor, and the capital. This is another step at controlling the labor and dictating to businesses what they have to do. I run a small business in Winona, and I can imagine. I do the taxes, I do the ordering, I do the inventory, I do everything in terms of the books. And I can't imagine some of the things they brought, and my 3 part-time employees I have, in trying to require all these things, and I don't remember all the details. All I remember is this is government taking over Minnesota small businesses and a big fat red. Thank you.
All right, here we go again. Representative Barb Bailey, does the government have an obligation to police all uses of flavors for the e-cigarettes? Does the government have an obligation to police all uses of mint and mango flavors and the like with e-cigarettes?
Well, I'm not quite sure. I'll try to get at what I think they're trying to ask. E-cigarettes, or what's also called vape, has just skyrocketed. Some folks would tell you they think it's the tsunami of the addiction coming next for our young people. There are hoodies, sweatshirts now, where the tie, on the hooded sweatshirt, you can fit a vape in that tie. So when kids are at high school, well, you've got one, I don't mean to point you out, but you know what I'm saying? I know you don't have a vape, but it's in there, and so, the kids can be, they're vaping in class. This stuff is made in China, it's made all over the world, it's not regulated. We don't know the chemicals that are in it. And so the flavor issue is, that's what's enticing young kids, whether it's mango or, I don't know, bubble gum or what have you. This is toxic. So we did one thing this year, is we included vaping in the Minnesota Clean Indoor Air Act, which means, you can't smoke in a public place, you can't smoke a cigarette, well, you can't vape in a public place. But we've got to get on this in a lot bigger fashion. You've probably seen recently in the news, young kids being taken to the emergency room with advanced lung disease from vape. They don't even know what they're ingesting. So we need more study on it. We've got to get through to these kids that this is not, a healthy thing to do. If somebody wants to ask more about it, we can drill in, but hope that helped.
Yep, I think that does. And I would add too, the advanced lung disease is crystallization in the lungs, which is not, can't fix that. Where tar on the lungs, in time that can go away, but not the crystallization. would you like to comment as well?
Yeah, so I think the question was, should government be controlling the flavors? No, I mean, if the government believes and the people believe that vaping is a health hazard that needs to be controlled, that needs to be outlawed, another situation where government comes in and directs people's lives, then they should just prohibit it. We shouldn't be dashing around the lines and telling companies how to flavor their product. I mean, that's not the place of government. Government is there to, we're there to educate our kids. We're there to build roads and bridges. We're there to take care of public safety and have police and firefighters, those types of things. Those are the functions of government. But I think we need to look a lot of things in perspective. What are the byproducts of vaping? Carbon dioxide and water, right? I mean, I don't know that. Has anybody died from vaping yet?
Yes.
Yeah.
Got one that died? Did he have one? You didn't have
What?
he didn't have one of your deals, did he? No.
No. But there have been deaths.
There have, okay. Okay. How many kids have died from car accidents? How many kids have died from alcohol? How many have died from, how many have gotten cigarettes, cancer from cigarettes? We've already got prohibitions on many of those things. And I mean, the same discussion goes into guns. We've got all kinds of prohibitions on guns in law already, and the criminals aren't following it. Is government the answer to all of these things?
No.
When we have all these laws that aren't being followed already, are we going to make it illegaler?
Like that one.
I mean, it's at some point it's senseless, and at some point we need to look at whose responsibility is this. Is this a family's responsibility, or is it government's responsibility to tell kids how they're supposed to be living their lives? What's falling down? It goes back to that question that Representative Haley answered earlier about early childhood. Should we have government training kids from birth to 3? We got legislators who are forming a birth to 3 committee. So they're backing the school bus up to the maternity ward room door and filling it up, driving to the school. I mean, at what point do we realize there's a breakdown in the family that has gone too far? We need to take care of getting rid of some of these inhibitions that are holding families' ability and identify them so that families can become strong again and take care of those things that they take care of. A government answer to everything is not going to do it. We're going to try to work around the edges and have government fix this and tweak this and tell this person they can't do that. And then, they're going to go on and they're going to find meth. Or they're going to go on and, find, gin or whatever it is. We have to think about the root cause of the problem. And government needs to back away and give families and empower families again, instead of taking away their role by starting at birth. Can you figure that out? I can't either. But that's all I got. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's go on to an updated question. Can you give an update, please? This would be for both of you, since it's not indicated. We've read a lot about waste and fraud in the child care fund and other areas of health and human services. Can you give an update, please, on the waste and fraud in the child care fund and other areas of human and health services?
As I said, I serve on Health and Human Services and particularly on the Finance Committee, so I'm familiar with these areas. It's appalling to me that this continues to happen. The most recent example was the Child Care Assistance Fund, which are funds that are given to low-income families to support their kids being in appropriate child care. What we found out is that folks were basically putting up a shell name across in a strip mall and saying, you know, this is so-and-so's childcare. And they were recruiting mothers to bring your kids, walk in the front door, and then walk out the back door with them. There was no childcare, no services were being provided, and they were fraudulently filling out these forms and submitting them to the state, and we were then reimbursing the childcare to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. It's documented, the legislative auditor documented it. The person in charge of that department was then put on administrative leave and was paid her salary for the past 9 months. And the department still hasn't even started their investigation on her to find out, again, who knew, how did this happen, how did this go on for years? And then the governor's office wanted us to put more money into that fund. I mean, you can't make it up. Again, when I look at legislation, I look for facts. I look for, would this work in my family? Would this work in my business? Will this help my town? We are a rich state. I firmly believe we have enough resources to help those that are truly in need, but we are squandering money. The Health and Human Services Department of Health budget is our largest state agency. They employ almost 8,000 people, $30 billion. We don't have a handle on it. The child care assistance is just one area. The Senate has the gavel, so the Senate Health and Human Services Committee held a hearing last week. We asked the interim commissioner to come. We asked the two folks who resigned and then said, no, we want our jobs back, to come. We asked the newly assigned commissioner to come. Well, we got one person to show up. And then we were told the rest of the folks had vacation that week. I said, you can't tell me that 6 other people that we asked to testify had family vacation at the same time, when state representatives and senators that serve on Health and Human Services all made it a point to be there for that hearing, because we are demanding answers for the taxpayers. The governor said we would get answers that day. We heard nothing new. The acting commissioner actually came in with a PowerPoint presentation telling us about Health and Human Services. I said, I don't think so. I've been on this committee 3 years. You don't have to repeat those slides for me. I want to know what is going on in the management of the department. We're going to hold more hearings. We've got a hearing, Labor Day week. A lot of people take off. I have a hearing September 3rd, and I have a hearing September 4th. Because we are just going to continue to ask for answers. And there will be proposals this session, possibly, that we need to break up that department. It's too big. It's too unwieldy. And we don't have control. So that's the update. We have to continue to press, and we're going to need, different leadership there. Fundamentally, that's what I think. It's a breakdown in leadership. But I also started looking into our whistleblower laws, because when there's so much report of fraud and abuse, we know we're sending SNAP money, which is food stamps. SNAP money in Minnesota, SNAP money is being cashed in Hawaii. We're sending checks for health insurance to people who don't live here and people that are dead. That was reported 2 years ago, and they're still not doing what's called periodic data matching, so they match up the database to say, Barb Haley still lives here, she's still alive, and she still qualifies. They weren't doing that. We've been asking them for 5 years to do that. So we just got to hold people accountable, and I think we got to put the brakes on some of these programs until we are assured that it's being run appropriately, and that's what I'll continue to do this summer. People say to me, oh, aren't you glad you're off? I say, we're not off. Government doesn't stop during the summer. Just because we're not in session, this is the kind of stuff that we do. When we know there's waste, fraud, and abuse, we're going to hold hearings. We're going to ask for answers, and we're going to get the legislative auditor on it. Hope that helps.
Very much. On a little brighter note, I mean, that was really depressing, but thank you for the truth and trying to find out some answers.
Thanks, Lorna. I think Representative Haley nailed it pretty well. I began authoring bills, I believe, 2 biennia ago, seeing the waste, fraud, and abuse in the Medicaid program. And the legislative auditor at the time had already done 4 or 5 or maybe 6 different audits over a 10-year period at that point. And one of his biggest concerns is his agency does a lot of work. They do a lot of audits and they deliver them to the legislature, and then plop, they sit there on the shelf. And in this area, I know I raised the issue multiple times over the last 2 biennia, brought bills forward both times that passed the House, were part of the HHS omnibus bill that brought accountability to the waste, fraud, and abuse. We were dumping out between $115 and $271 million just over a 5-month period, and 40% of the Medicaid population, dumping it out of the tailpipe of the car onto the road, and it was rolling into the ditch. And that was hundreds of millions of dollars. The department now has come out this past year and said it could be as much as $1 billion. So we need to get a handle on this. That's just the Medicaid portion. And Representative Haley talked about the CCAP fraud, the child care assistance. We have daycare welfare in Minnesota. We have welfare in almost every area. I mean, we are paying for people, government is paying for people to send their kids to daycare. And we're being defrauded. We got $5 or $6 million, I think, in convictions of this type that Representative Haley talked about. 5 or 6 million that are solid, they're already convicted. And we have Democrats that are denying that there's a problem in the Minnesota House of Representatives. And the governor has been nothing but crickets on this. And the whistleblower in the department who worked for the OIG's office, the Office of Inspector General, said it could be as high as $100 million. And there were assertions that some of this might have been going overseas. I mean, that is a mess. You've got $30 million of MNsure premiums where people who are on our health care welfare program, where they get subsidized for the health care. By the way, some of them get Cadillac policies that can be used anywhere in the country, and they don't pay a whole lot of money for them. That little bit of money they were supposed to pay back to the government, the governor said, you know what, we're not going to collect it. $30 million. The SNAP money, that was, how much was that, Barb? That was $30 or $40 million of SNAP fraud that's going on, and that's documented. And then we got a gazillionaire guy who, from the cities, that came and testified probably in your committee and in the Senate, and he did the last biennium too. He signed up for the SNAP program. And he had assets, millions of dollars of assets, but he wanted to prove that he could get into the program, and he did. And then he went and testified in front of the legislature and said, legislature, guess what? Your program's a piece. Your program is a piece, and it needs work, or it needs to go away. Our government is so big in this state, and the valve is a one-way check valve. The accountability side doesn't come back. It only goes one way. And I'll tell you, we passed those 2 bills to bring reform to the Medicaid program each of the last 2 biennia. The Governor Dayton, wouldn't agree to either one of them, neither would the Democrats when they were in control in the Senate. And there's some protection of constituencies going on here. And I'll tell you, I've invoked it on the House floor at least on 2 different speeches. When everybody in the room knows that there's fraud going on and the people of the state are getting ripped off, that's when and they fail and refuse to act as a group, that's when it becomes institutional corruption. And that's what we have in the state of Minnesota. We all know what's going on, but we don't have the legislative and governor will to take care of it. We need, many of us in the legislature, Representative Haley and myself and others, are working on this problem. The governor has to step up to the plate. It's time for him to act and time for him to lead, because the people are getting run over The people who are paying the bill and the people who are actually supposed to be served by these programs are getting run over, and it needs to stop. That's all I got. Thanks.
Next question. At what point would you be pleased with Ilhan Omar? Meaning, what would she have to prove for you to be pleased? This is a question for you, Representative Steve. At what point would you be pleased with her? Meaning, what would she have to prove for you to be happy?
Yeah, well, happy is right.
Happy, not pleased.
Well, what I would
I'm
like
sorry.
Representative Omar to do is to answer some questions. She's answered none of them. She hasn't told us she won't even tell us who her family members are. She's only acknowledged one sibling, that is her sister Sarah Noor, who is in Kenya. She hasn't been willing to share her immigration records, which are on her phone. She's shown at least one report of the immigration records briefly. That might help clear things up a little bit. She won't come forward with that. She won't bring any of her family members or her ex-husband forward, who many of us believe is her brother, who was in England and now he is in Kenya, working with Sarah Noor, who is Representative Omar's only acknowledged sibling, after they got divorced, of course. Now, so they got divorced in 2011. About 2012, he went over to England. Today, he's in Mombasa, Kenya, or Nairobi, Kenya. Nairobi, Kenya was on his Facebook account. His name is on the back end of Sarah Noor's company website in the code. We need her to be honest. We haven't heard anything honest from Representative Omar. We haven't heard. If you are somebody if somebody accuses me of marrying my sister, which I don't have one, but if they did and I did, the first thing I would do is come forward to prove them wrong. Representative Omar has been silent. She's run the other way and said nothing. The ultimate thing would be for her to bring Ahmed Elmi here, and for the two of them to give a blood test. 123andMe could tell us definitively what we got going on with the brother-sister thing, whether it's true or not. But there's also the perjury that she committed, 7 counts in the marriage to the divorce that she did in 2017. There's a tax fraud that my campaign finance complaint excavated and brought to the surface on the 6th of June, just 2 months ago, that shows that she filed taxes with Ahmed Hersi. She was married to Ahmed Elmi, and she filed taxes jointly with Hersi. Now, how do you forget who you're married to? I mean, anyway. Lorna, I hope that's helpful. But there's a lot of opportunity for the Congresswoman to step forward. She has been evasive, and the truth would be a great place to start.
Yes, the truth is always a good place to start. We could all agree on that. Representative Haley, I understand Red Wing is headed towards being a sanctuary city. For those of us who are against it, what steps can we take to prevent it? Also, how much progress has Isaiah made in Red Wing? Isaiah is in quotes, so I'm not sure what that means, but do you have an answer for us for Red Wing possibly heading to be a sanctuary city? And for those that are against it, what can we do to prevent that?
Well, that would be a city council decision. I don't know that I can I can't affirm that we're headed that way. I know that it's been discussed, but I don't know that there's a current, proposal up for a vote. So whoever asked that question, I guess I would have checked with City Council myself. That hasn't been brought up to me for a while. And again, that would be a city decision. I am not in favor of that. You're not a nation unless you have borders. You're not a nation unless you have laws. That doesn't mean we don't need immigration. As I talked earlier, I'm very focused on our workforce shortage. We do need immigration. We need lawful immigration. And we need immigration where we can fully vet. And we need immigration that we can call out the skills and the trades and the talents that we need in this country. That's the kind of immigration. And regardless of whether it's been Republican or Democrat in Washington, nobody has solved this. So we can point fingers at each other, but that's kind of the facts. This has been a challenge for over a decade, and there hasn't been the political will to have real comprehensive immigration reform at the federal level. So that's what's needed. Until we get there, I don't agree with sanctuary cities. We are perpetuating illegal entry into our country, and we don't have a way of vetting who's coming. There was a second part of that question about Isaiah. Isaiah is a group that is a political advocacy group. I know they visit me in St. Paul. They held an event in Red Wing at a church not too long ago that Senator Goggin and I were invited to be at, and we went. They are not always, I don't think, truthful as to what their cause is. They are financed like any other political advocacy group, and they have an agenda. And I don't think it's an appropriate place in a sanctuary of a church to hold those events. So I communicated to people I would not be coming to another one.
Very good, thank you. Goodness, the questions. Okay, let's tackle this one. I mean, you guys tackle this one. Minnesota has a history of providing voters with a secret ballot, meaning someone can find out what you voted in an election, but not how or who you voted for in that election. Secretary of State Steve Simon has made yet another change in the new presidential primary where the public will not see how you voted, but the major parties, including the new legal marijuana, now Party of Minnesota, and will now know which party that you supported. With identifying Republican donors and supporters being targeted for harassment at work and in public, this may suppress the Republican vote. Democrats accuse Republicans for voter depression. This is a clear voter suppression tactic on the part of the Democrats. How was such a change made into law without one public hearing on it, and what do you intend to do about that? Do you want me to read part of that again? Do you get the gist? I think it's kind of a combination question about the secret ballots and Democrats, again, kind of going after the Republicans.
Okay, so those are called provisional ballots. And many states have them. I authored a bill this last session to have provisional ballots. We've had it in front of the legislature in the past. It is a solution that many states have implemented very successfully. And what it does is says, you go in to vote. We've got very liberalized voter registration and same-day voting laws and rules in this state. You can actually vouch for up to how many people now? It was 15 and now it's down to 8. Okay.
8.
You can vouch for up to 8 people with having nothing but a utility bill. No other state that I know of has anything that is yeah, you don't even need a utility bill. All you have to do is vouch and say, yeah, they live down the street from me. No other state has that. Very, very liberalized voting here in Minnesota with a lot of uncertainty. So right now, if you go in on the same day and you vote, and you register that day, because you can register that day and then vote, the details about that are not investigated until after all the ballots are counted and the results are given and the new person attains their office. So it's months after that when they go to check in and say, Mary, do you really live in Zumbrota? Oh, Wyoming? Oh, and I've never really heard them go back and do all that checking, but they do. They're supposed to, by law, do that checking. But it's too late. The cow is out of the barn, the horse is out of the barn at that point. So provisional ballots, the way they work instead is you go there if you register on election day and you're not registered ahead of time and you have not been adequately and properly checked to ensure you are who you say you are and you're qualified to vote in that precinct, etc., your ballot goes in a special envelope. Now, maybe it goes in a green envelope or a blue envelope or whatever they do, but that's a provisional ballot, and it gets put in with the rest of the ballots, and it's only counted after all of those things are verified. And so, if the election is close and the provisional ballots are required because it's within the margin of error that the provisional ballots could provide, then they go and do all the background on it to make sure everybody, and they count the ones who are legal, and they don't count the ones who are fraudulent. And that's how provisional ballots work. A very good idea. The Democrats have fought us at every turn. They want everybody and anybody to vote without any controls in place. They want less controls. Secretary of State Simon has been helping them. He's a Democrat. Very good man, but very partisan, and his agenda is he's pursuing his liberal agenda at a way that sometimes, at least I know there's a lawsuit going on that the Minnesota Voters Alliance has been bringing forward. He has been beat in court by 2 different sets of judges, is going all the way to the Supreme Court, spending our money to do that. So my estimation of Steve Simon has changed a little bit since when he was in the legislature. But I'm sure he's getting pressure from all different sides. But anyway, that's provisional ballots. And Lorna, I'm going to stop there, and maybe Representative Haley can fix what I didn't address.
Okay. Oh, no. He did a very good job. Go ahead.
I think he did a very good job. Okay.
We have time for one more question. It's 7:37. Let's see here. Is there anything in particular? Well, no, you guys are going to have a chance to do your closing statement, so let me touch on. Okay, we'll touch on this subject because I think it's going to lead into. Okay. What are your thoughts regarding the growing international movement about boycott, diversement, and sanctions against Israel, nonviolent freedom of speech, and the only thing that solved apartheid in South Africa? Does that make sense? What are your thoughts regarding the growing international movement about boycott, diversement, and sanctions against Israel? Is that not really maybe? Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, it's not related to state politics
Okay.
at all where we serve. I can just clarify the BDS movement, so boycott, divestiture, and sanctions. So they shorten it when they say BDS. Our efforts against Israel. What is, I guess, relevant to where I serve in the state of Minnesota is that I signed on to a letter with a number of our colleagues condemning that as Israel is a strong, ally and partner to us, and I don't agree with that, that practice, I guess you would say, at the federal level. But again, that's not something that we have jurisdiction over in the state of Minnesota. And I'm not sure where they were headed with the other question about apartheid.
Yep, that's okay. Let me go on to this one here. Okay, one more question. We've got time for that. Negative publicity has finally forced some private companies and insurance plans to cap the insulin costs. How are you as legislators working on a more stable long-term solution so citizens don't have to resort to media cycle for companies and insurance providers to cap the price of insulin and other needed life-saving medications? Medication questions.
I'll go quick here, and then Representative Haley, this is kind of her bailiwick, I'll let her talk about it. But, I think we have to look at the involvement of government to begin with. And there's this thing that's kind of growing in some areas called direct primary care, where the consumer and the healthcare provider form out a contract for their primary care going forward, and there's just a contract payment for them going forward. Unbelievable idea. We've been kind of forced as a culture into this notion that either insurance, which it really isn't anymore, or government is going to be placed, this big entity, either big insurance or big government, placed between the consumer and the healthcare provider. And they suck a lot of money out of the system. They control the system, give you less choices, and this is what you get, situations like this. Now, my answer, even before these companies came forward, was less government, not more. We don't need to look to government, Lorna, for a solution here. Obviously, the free market fibers that are left in our health insurance companies have figured that, people are concerned about this. Maybe we need to make this available in a way that doesn't cost them as much money, and they've snapped into action. Well, thank goodness there's at least a few fibers of free marketism left in our health insurance companies, but they're very far from free market. So my answer, what does government need to do? Nothing. We need to get out of the way. We need to start figuring out how to do less and give people more healthcare freedom and get them out of the way between the consumer and the healthcare provider, rather than getting in there and mucking up the whole thing. That's the problem to begin with. Anyway, I'll let Representative Haley give you a more intelligent answer.
The insulin debate has been a tough one. It's tragic when you hear that somebody has lost their life because of rationing insulin. And we heard that Alex Smith testimony many times, both in committee and throughout the session. So, like I said, those are committees that you come out with just this, pain in your gut, because it shouldn't have happened. The manufacturers of insulin all have emergency programs, but they are restricted from marketing that because of certain laws on the federal level. So that's the first thing to know, that there are emergency insulin programs and low-cost programs. The second thing is, as in the question they stated, our major HMO providers in Minnesota, Medica, UCare, third one came out this week. They have just introduced in the past couple weeks either a $25 cap on insulin per month or various programs. So I concur with Representative Drazkowski that the free market is responding to this need. So that's good. The proposals that we heard, the problem with them is any time, well, first, the Alex Smith bill, the proposal was to tax insulin manufacturers and put that money into a fund, and then have the government, remember when I talked about all the fraud and waste and abuse and how we can't do it much right in HHS? Have the government start a new program between the pharmacies to basically run insulin. So I had no confidence that, one, we could do that and do that well, and that it would actually get to the people who needed it and help. What's just happened in the free market is a much better solution. Plus, what we didn't have any confidence in is if we were gonna assign this tax to insulin manufacturers, there was no way of knowing that they would just increase the price further for those folks in the private market who can pay. So now we've just created an incentive, knowing that the government's gonna pick up a certain portion of that tab. Well, that just creates incentive for the manufacturers to spike their prices even more. So this is a difficult thing in government. You hear these stories, they are painful. You go home at night distraught over that. But just because you feel bad about a situation doesn't mean that government is the right solution. And that's where you take a difficult vote, and someone's gonna blast us all in the press about it with not knowing all the facts, and having sat through the hearings and having looked at the numbers and looked at how it would have been implemented. It sounds good in a soundbite, but I don't think it would work. Now, I do agree that we have to address rising prescription costs all across the board. This is something else that we have to do at the federal level. There is no reason why insulin that was invented in what year? You're smarter than I.
Yeah, but I'm not.
Right, but it's no different than when it was first invented. Insulin is still insulin, and it's a life-saving medication. There's no reason that it had to go from $25.50 a month to $200, $300, $400, $500 that people can't afford it. So we've got to ask that root question and get into the supply chain of why is that cost continuing to rise. Insulin in Canada isn't as much. I have a meeting next week with Senator Benson, who chairs the Senate committee, and we're looking at what's called re-importation. Can we literally re-import insulin that US manufacturers are selling to Canada and buy it back here and have it be cheaper? I don't know if that's gonna work or not, but I just tell you, it's not falling on deaf ears. We're looking at ways that we can address it at the state level. I hope that helps.
Very much. I think that answers that question. Thank you very, very much. I would like to ask Representative Steve Drazkowski. Drazkowski. For some closing remarks, please. 5 minutes. Keep us on task. We have time for a one-on-one afterwards.
Okay, if I go shorter than that, it's okay, Lorna? Okay. I'm not going to promise, but I'm going to try. Well, thank you all for having us, and thanks for being here tonight. We just got by with finished with the budget year of the 2-year biennium. Now, the biennium that we are in just began on July 1st, and it'll go for 2 years. And we're on the clock once, around the sun once, and then around the sun again until June 30th of 2021. When we were in session in January through May, we were debating this biennium that we're in and the budget for it. At the time, we were looking at a $1.5 billion surplus or over collection of the people's money that was projected to happen during this biennium. If we did nothing, if we changed not a single tax rate, just because of the strengthened economic activity that President Trump and the Jobs and Tax Cuts Act have brought to this country, to this state, we were seeing more revenue coming in because the economic engine is working at a higher temperature. And with that coming, the Democrats still wanted to raise taxes even more. So we were at last biennium at a $45.5 billion general operating fund budget. The House Democrats proposed 49.2 or something like that billion dollars. The governor, the Democrat governor, proposed like 49.8 billion or something like that. It was close to 50 billion. The Senate Republicans proposed 47.2, I think, which was essentially taking the base increase that was already written into law and accepting that and not anymore. Now, I would have liked them to start off our small caucus, the New House Republican caucus. We had a budget too, and we actually decreased and went below the 45.5. We went to like 45.3 billion dollars, and had we had more resource people and time, we would have found even more cuts, because there's a lot you could actually do. But the ones that counted are the Senate Republicans at the base increase of about 47.2, and then Democrats were at close to $50 billion in their proposal. We ended up with 48.2 billion, so about $1 billion higher than the Senate Republicans, but nearly $2 billion less than the Democrats wanted. About a 6.5% increase over the last biennium, which, if you look at both last biennium and the biennium before, each of those general fund increases were at about 9%. And folks, that's when Republicans were in control in the House, and in one year in the House and the Senate. And so, on the flip side, I'm told, and I haven't looked extensively, but the all funds budget, I'm told, was close to a 10% increase. So what you have happen sometimes is legislatures will make the general funds budget look smaller, only 6.5% increase. By the way, are you guys getting 3.25% increase per year in your family budgets? I don't think so. I don't think anybody here is, or likely is, or has. I lost my train of thought now. Where are we going? But help me out. Where was I?
You were general fund versus all
Okay, all funds. Yeah. So all funds is increasing even higher. So a lot of times what happens is that people, the legislatures, will make the general fund amount look small, raise all these fees in a variety of areas like they did this last session. There were $144 million of fees sprinkled in all kinds of different areas.
Right.
Folks, those are tax increases. You add those fees in, which go into special funds, which are not part of the general fund, but they are part of the all funds budget, and that's how you get those differentials. With that, Al is raising his sign up. I'm going to tell you, I brought 3 amendments on the House floor that were pro-gun amendments to an anti-gun public safety bill, to one, get our first vote ever on concealed carry in the state of Minnesota, the Minnesota House, to get a vote on the Castle Doctrine in the Minnesota House, and to get a vote on lifetime concealed carry permits. Why do those of us that carry have to go back every 5 years to pay a trainer $100 and pay the sheriff another $100 to learn the same thing over and over again? Anyway, so we had votes on all those. The Democrats defeated all of them. But the good thing is, the Republican Senate defeated their very ugly anti-gun bills that would have put more and more laws and made things illegaler for the people who follow the law, but done nothing to stop the people who don't. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, closing remarks from Representative Barb Haley.
Well, I think Representative Drazkowski covered the budget well, so I won't go into that anymore. We did some really good things this past session as well. We passed an opioid bill. We passed reform in what's called the PBMs, pharmacy benefit managers, which is a piece of this whole supply chain and why drugs are so expensive. So we're starting that work. We also passed some reforms to how assisted living and nursing homes are licensed to make sure that your parents are safe when we hit that point and we have our folks in care. So you don't hear about a lot of those kind of heavy lift bills that are really bipartisan. So I wanted to point that out. There was lots of good work done. I concur with Representative Drazkowski in stopping $12 billion in taxes was the most important thing that we got done. This state is a wealthy state and we can serve the people in need, but we don't need to continue to be top 4 in every single tax category. I get calls every week from seniors who are having a hard time, affording and staying in their homes, paying their bills. And I get calls from other people who are saying, I'm leaving the state. We have great data on this flight out of Minnesota because our tax structure is it just doesn't make sense anymore to folks. So my focus is going to be on accountability in government and trying to get rid of some of this waste, fraud, and abuse. We can meet our needs. We can make sure that our kids are well educated, that our seniors are taken care of. We prove that we can fund roads and bridges without tax increases. We can continue to do that. We can fund our police and fire. We can do all those core functions of government without this trajectory. And we have that's gonna be a tough battle. Because Steve went through the numbers. I mean, the proposals that come in just have us on this ever increasing spend. And because I serve on Health and Human Services, I think that's where we're gonna be spending a lot of time in trying to wrap our heads around. Where's the money, just to use Steve's analogy, the money's going out the tailpipe and into the sewer. You've seen it in MNsure, you've seen it in MNLARS, now you've seen it in our assistance, funds, our welfare funds. Maybe if you read my report this past week, it's in our building permit fees, right? We've got an illegal tax on housing because municipalities are overtaxing on building permits, which is totally against the law. So I'm served on that commission, and that's the first thing we found out, is we've got $78 million in overtaxation on housing, illegal overtaxation. So that again, going into, wrapping up my second term here and running for my third, that is just like staring me in the face that we have a severe lack of accountability in our state government. We can do good by the people, we can meet our needs, but we've got to get rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse. So that'll be continue to be a focus of mine, and I think of a lot of my colleagues going into the next session. Thanks for having me, and we'll stick around. I did tell Senator Goggin I brought some of his flyers. Again, he's at his son's wedding, so if you want information, he wanted to make sure that I pointed that out, grab one, and he would always be willing to take your phone call and take your email. So thank you, Lorna, and thank you, Toastmasters, for hosting.
Very, very much, and thank all of you for spending your evening here with us and hearing some very valuable information. Stick around for another half an hour. We can do some one-on-one questions, comments, and concerns with these two. Thank you again. Have a good evening.